Shalom, this is Tirsa Lewis with the Echad, Israeli Beit Midrash. I'm just getting on here for a moment to speak to the ladies and to address the question that I'm asked very frequently. And that question is, are we permitted to cook on the high days of the feast? And I'll also briefly mention the command that is in regards to eating matzah during the Feast of Unleavened Bread as well. So the first question being cooking on the high days. The high days, when I'm referring to, are the first and last days of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, Shavuot, Pentecost, also known as the Feast of Weeks, the Yom Teruah, or the Day of Trumpets, also known as Rosh Hashanah, and the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles, and the last great day, or the 8th day, that's added on to the end of the Feast of Tabernacles, which is also called Shemini Atzeret. So we have, how many days is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 high days that are observed in the biblical Hebrew calendar. And so those days are called Shabbatans. And so a Shabbatan is similar to a Shabbat. We have a Shabbat every week. Hallelujah. And we also have the Day of Atonement, which is also called a Shabbat. And on those days, we do not cook food. We may warm up food, as far as foods that have been prepared already, but we typically we don't actually cook on Shabbats. What we do on Shabbatans, a Shabbatan is a day in which we don't do any work, but we are permitted to cook for the holy day. And so where do we get that from? So if you go to Exodus chapter 12, and we'll start in verse 15. It says here, 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. This is speaking about the Feast of Unleavened Bread, Matzot. But on the first day you shall remove leaven from your houses. For whoever eats anything leavened from the first day until the 7th day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. And on the first day you shall have a holy assembly, and another holy assembly on the 7th day. No work at all shall be done on them, except what must be eaten by every person. That alone may be prepared by you. And so on the 1st and the 7th day, which are the Shabbatans, the high days of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, we are permitted to cook and prepare food that's needed for those days. However, we are not permitted to work on those days. And so looking at that and seeing that there's a precedent of being able to prepare food for the feast, it's a feast, right? Being able to prepare food for the feast days is a necessary component of actually celebrating the feast. And so on the high days of the feast, on the Shabbatans of the feast, the Shabbatan feast days, we are able to cook. However, on the Shabbats and on the weekly Shabbats and on the Day of Atonement, we do not cook. And on the weekly Shabbats, we warm up our food, but we don't, prepare it, from scratch. On the Day of Atonement, because that's a day in which we're ceasing from eating, we don't deal with food at all on the Day of Atonement. Okay, so I want to also speak about the command to eat matzah, because we see that here in this verse, Exodus 12, verse 15, which says, 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. And so there is a command, to actually eat the bread, not to just stop eating leaven, but to actually eat the bread. Okay, another quick point I want to make before I hop off of here. I'm at 4 minutes and 49 seconds right now. Yeah, I am on a countdown mode on this video. I want to talk about just the whole thought process of warming up food on the Shabbat. because a lot of people coming out of different communities don't warm up food on a Shabbat. They might eat cold cuts or salads or just anything cold. They don't want to warm anything up. And, I don't knock anyone for their observance of Shabbat. In fact, I think that, however you observe Shabbat and you're keeping it to the best of your ability, hallelujah. But if you are looking at certain commands to make those determinations, I will just give you some thoughts. And so one of them is Exodus 16:23. Exodus 16 verse 23. Let's get there. Which says, we'll start at 22. Now it came about on the 6th day, they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each one. When all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, then he said to them, this is what Yahweh meant. Tomorrow is a Sabbath observance, a holy Sabbath unto Yahweh. Bake what you will bake and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over put aside to be kept until the morning. And so on the 6th day, the people received twice as much manna, and they would prepare for the Shabbat. And so the cooking and the preparation work and all of that was done on Friday. It was done on the day before the Shabbat so that there was provision for the Shabbat, so that they didn't have to think about those things on the Shabbat. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that, you're not warming anything up on a Shabbat, but that means that you're making provision up front so that that is not the focal point of your day. And as mothers and as wives and as, single women or wherever stage you may find yourself in, your focus and concentration should be the most high on the Shabbat, and, and not, mundane responsibilities such as food preparation. Now, if we go to Exodus 35, verses 2 through 3, this is another verse which, can be looked at here in regards to, cooking on a Shabbat. And it says here, Exodus 35, verses 2 through 3, for 6 days work shall be done, but on the 7th day you shall have a holy day, a Sabbath of complete rest to Yahweh. Whoever does any work on it shall be put to death. Verse 3 says, this is a key verse, you shall not kindle a fire in any of your dwellings on the Sabbath day. And so when we look at, kindling the fires on the Shabbat, kindling the fire on the Sabbath, a lot of people will say, well, that would even include, warming up food, even warming up food in the microwave. We don't want to kindle any fires on the Sabbath. And so I don't know if anyone has here or anyone listening has ever kindled a fire. And at Sukkot, we kindle fires all the time. And it can really involve a lot of work to kindle a fire, especially if there is wet wood or damp wood or whatever. It really can involve a lot of energy and effort to fan it and to get it started. But once the fire gets started, it's nothing to keep throwing in, wood or whatever type of material you're using to feed the fire and keep it going. And so the command is not to put so much effort into starting the fire that you are actually doing work and that you're not focusing on the holiness of the day. And so if you have a fire, keep that fire going because, you could be cold. You know what I mean? You're not going to be cold, but you're going to keep the fire going. You're going to start the fire and you're going to keep the fire going. So that doesn't mean anything in regards to, not warming up food on a fire that has already been prepared. Nowadays, we just turn on switches and hit buttons. But back in that time, of course, they had a lot more work and effort that had to go into the preparation process of the fire that would be used. Now, if they had the fire going, that's one thing. But as far as starting the fire on the Shabbat, that was something that they was not going to do. So I hope that these things or these thoughts or whatever are helpful to women as they are coming along in the faith, or as they are, reviewing or thinking about certain things or certain concepts, such as cooking on the holy days and cooking on on Shabbat, or warming up food on Shabbat, or warming up food on the high days, or any of those types of things. Or even if they're thinking about eating bread and eating, matzah, and how we're to go about those commands. So as you are on this journey, I just say, God bless. And, I just pray that all of us, as we are on this walk, that we are in our hearts seeking to please the Most High with all our beings. Hallelujah, and God bless.